Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mindfuel, where we are making mental fitness accessible to endurance athletes so you can train your brain as consciously as you train your body. Today, we're diving into goal setting and how to set pragmatic, tiered goals. And joining us for this conversation is an accomplished age group athlete and a personal friend of mine, Josh Scott. Josh, welcome to Mindfuel.
Thanks, Laura. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So, we start every episode here, Josh, by asking our guests to introduce themselves, not by telling us what you do, but instead by telling us who you are. So, said another way, how would Grace, your wife, or some of your friends or family describe you?
It's a great question. Let's see. I am a motivated, accomplished musician in a past life and runner now. I think they would also say that I can be very serious about the things that I'm doing, and I kind of go all in when it comes to activities that I'm a part of or jobs that I take on or things like that. And I'm very dedicated to the things that I get passion out of. In the last handful of years, that's been running and endurance sports.
Nice. Well, I would definitely concur with what you've just said, having known you for a few years now, and you've touched on it, but can you go into a little bit more detail on what your relationship to endurance sports is?
Yeah, so this goes all the way back to when I was in high school. I remember very distinctly the very first time I went for a run. I was in middle school and I hated it. I was never a very athletic or fit kid when I was growing up. And so that first run, I ran to the end of our block and I was I had a side stitch and I was out of breath and I was like, I'm never doing this again. And then in high school, I was in band and we did marching band and I actually started running just to try to be a little bit more fit. And so I started running in high school, just casually, and then ran my first race in 2008. I think I ran a half marathon, and then I didn't race again for a long time. And, I've run over the years now, but around COVID, my wife decided that she wanted to get into triathlon. I don't really remember why, but she introduced it to me. She was like, "Hey, I'm doing this triathlon in Austin next week." I was like, "All right, cool." So I went and watched and spectated and cheered her on. And it was just I had so much fun just watching and seeing all of the things that people were doing. And so I got into it and I started kind of my endurance athlete journey in triathlon. I've raced 70.3, have raced Olympic, have done an Ironman a couple years ago and had a pretty good run with doing Ironman and doing, triathlons. And then I ran grandma's marathon last summer and I broke 3 hours for the first time. I ran a 2:55 and I was really ecstatic about that. And so that fall I did another triathlon, and then coming into this year, since I had qualified for Boston, I decided that I was just going to focus on running. And so that's really been my journey up to this point. And I've really just enjoyed focused training on running. I really have kind of fallen in love with it. Not that I didn't love it already, but it's just been such a great journey for me and I've gotten a lot out of it. And I've built a great community here in Colorado Springs. And I have started dabbling in coaching a little bit. I've got a former colleague that is racing a marathon and trying to break 4 hours. And so I think it's all just been something that I've got a real passion for and I've really enjoyed doing. So yeah, I think that's the short version probably, or the long version.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I was thinking ahead of speaking to you today, how long have we actually known each other? And it's been almost 4 years ago now since you joined the company where we were both working. I was already working at the time, and we quickly bonded over our love of endurance sports. And I must say that actually it's been really amazing. The journey that you've just described has been overlapping with most of the time that I've known you. And it's been so cool to watch you just go from strength to strength. You're always a very strong athlete, but you've been so focused, as you said you are at the beginning, and continue to set these increasingly ambitious goals for yourself and find ways to achieve them. Even while managing intense jobs, you moved states, you have a wife, you're building a family. So you've always kind of just given me motivation and kind of been this, had this spark when you talk about endurance sports. And I'm curious if you could share more with all of us about what keeps you motivated and driving toward those goals. Especially, you mentioned kind of navigating, different sports, different time goals. How have you selected those and held yourself accountable to them?
My first marathon was Austin Marathon in 2023. Just going into that race, my goal was actually to try to break 3 hours. I was trying to run a 3 hour or slightly faster, and that was my first marathon. So
Yeah,
anyone can,
ambitious for your first one. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less from you, but ambitious.
yeah, anyone who's listening who knows marathon times, sub 3 hours, kind of a goal that a lot of people chase. And so I hadn't really worked with a coach before, and so I had a coach for that block that, I've known for years. When I first told him that, I think he was a little taken aback. He was like, "We can try that, but I don't know if that's going to be the outcome." And so I have always set goals that feel attainable but are also going to push me and challenge me. And I think that's been the way that it's been in my life in general, like from the way that I was in my music career and my teaching career and, leading marching bands to, state contests and massive national competitions. But I think the goal setting for me has always been like, I want to set an attainable goal that is also challenging and is going to push me and drive me. And I think, time goals are helpful indicators, and they're obviously important when it comes to goal setting. But I told my coach last night, they're kind of arbitrary numbers too. And so I try not to have too much of a relationship with, I have to hit this time goal. And if I don't, like, the block has been a failure. And so those kinds of time goals keep me motivated, but they're not everything to me. Not the, it's not the that's not the only outcome I'm looking for when I'm looking at a goal and setting it. And I think goals are also not, for me, are also not about outcomes with a race. Like this block was, I want to peak at 85 miles a week. I actually ended up going to 90 and having really consistent training. I want to incorporate strength training into my routines, and I have been doing that now for the last few years. And so I think there are all kinds of goals that you can set that are not just about outcomes and about results that also help me stay motivated.
There's so much in there I want to dig into, particularly the latter part of what you were saying around having maybe multi-layered goals. But before we get to that, you've mentioned several times working with a coach. And I'm curious how much of the kind of confirming what your goal is done with the advice of your coach versus you're taking that to him or her and they're sort of validating and then saying, great, here's the plan to get there. How do those conversations look and where do you seek input or not?
Yeah, he and I have developed a great relationship over the years. And, I think with any coaching partnership, you have some ups and downs. And it's taken us a while to kind of figure out what that relationship should look like when it comes to goal setting. And so I typically bring the goal to him and we dialogue about the possibility of that being a reality, dialogue about the training. I'm very much a person who likes to know, and he's kind of a person who doesn't want to give you the whole plan up front because it's not just a out of the box plan. So we dialogue a lot about that initial goal, but throughout the season and throughout a block, we also have a lot of conversations to calibrate and make sure that we're still on the right track. I have input on the workouts that I do, and I have ideas about the things that I'd like to do that I think are going to help. And so this summer was a prime example of that. My goal this year was to run a 245. And knowing that was a lofty goal, I knew I was going to have to get faster. And so we also set a goal this summer to run a fast 5K. So I did a 5K block, July, August timeframe to prep for the block going into Indianapolis. And, those were things that he may have programmed, but I have a lot of input on those kinds of things. I also think there are plenty of people who like to have a coach who says, who helps define the goal. And personally, somebody who I am a motivated person, so I like to define the goal. And it also helps me hold myself accountable. Like some people need coaches to hold them accountable. And that's less of what I need personally, but it's helpful to have that person to validate because he's validated me throughout the block when I've had down days or I've had like bad workouts or, tough long runs. And I've had plenty of those throughout the block,
Yeah.
but he's there to help validate and confirm like we're still on the right track. Things are still trending the direction that we need them to.
Yeah, fantastic. I think a lot of us who pursue endurance sports, we have to be wired a certain way to want to push ourselves.
Mm.
And I think some of the benefit of coaches can almost be to rein that in a little bit and remind us that we are doing enough. Sounds like that might be the case for you
Yeah.
sometimes, and just helping keep that confidence up. Like you said, when you have some tough stretches, that this is it's a marathon, not a sprint, and I I can't think of a better, analogy. That's a terrible pun right now, but, just to keep that bigger picture
Mhm.
in mind along the way, and our bodies are not they are machines, but they're not. I think leads us into some of what you were saying around you keep multiple goals in mind throughout at the you gave us some good examples about different types of goals you might set, like weekly running mileage, time goals, specific races you either want to qualify for or perform in. How have you decided what those multiple things are, and how do you tier those and kind of rank them and prioritize them for yourself?
So I think the macro goal is usually a time-based goal because, I think the outcome and the result is something we all are striving for in some ways. But I think below that are all of the other things that are going to help me get there. And while the macro goal is still really important to me, the other goals that ladder up to it are actually the things that you have to do consistently day in
Mm,
and day out. You can't show up to the race having put in a poor block or like an inconsistent block and expect to, achieve the macro goal that you might have set for yourself. And so for me, especially as I've gotten older, because I turned 40 this year, I'll be 41 next year. Like my years of being fast are, I don't know if they're dwindling, but I've got to be really thoughtful about how I train. And so a lot of my goals in the last few years have really been focused on how to become a more durable. And
mm.
so the strength training goals have been really important to me, making sure that that's a regular part of my routine. That's been one. I've taken that more seriously. I have a strength coach that I work with every week, and then I have a individual workout that I do on the like recovery goals. And this is a huge topic and kind of fad right now with Whoop and all of the different like activity trackers, but they're helpful data points and indicators for me just to keep me consistent. And recovery to me is sleep and recovery are things that I took for granted when I was younger. And so those have
Yeah.
become really important goals for me. And markers of readiness and preparation for a race. Those two things in particular have become really important over the last couple of years and have become goals that I continually look toward to make sure that I'm on track. And then, I think there's process goals that are also part of this. And for me, process is the weekly mileage, is the time on feet during the week. So that's mileage, but also like the overall time is also important. The structure of my week is the same every single week. I've got a Wednesday workout, I've got a Saturday or Sunday long run, and then everything else is easy. But that process is really important. And it's honestly what's, I think, been part of just my overall success in the two big blocks that I've done for grandmas and for Indianapolis. And so those goals have helped guide me and honestly have been a huge part of the reason why I've been able to, I think, achieve the things that I've been able to do in a short amount of time. Like I only started running marathon 3 years ago. And so it's been, you know, a quick progression in a lot of regards. And again, I think it's about the deliberate nature of my training and the specific goals and lines in the sand that I draw for myself to make sure that I'm staying on track. And I have fun doing it. Like I've talked about a lot of like very serious things, but I legitimately just have fun doing all of this. Like Tuesday nights, I look forward to my workout the next day. My wife would tell you that I am like very serious when I wake up on Wednesday mornings, and part of it's because it's early, but part of it's because I get kind of in the zone and get focused for, the thing that I'm going to go do. But I've tried to smile more and just have more fun with it because it's fun. It should be fun. And if I'm
What's the
not
point otherwise, right?
totally, if I'm not enjoying it, I think there's something missing. And so that's why I've continued to just like devote so much time to this. And running 85, 90-mile weeks is, 12 hours of time. And so I want to enjoy it. And I really do. And living in Colorado helps too, because it's just beautiful here.
You're lucky with that.
Yeah.
It's great to hear you say that around enjoying the journey. That seems to be something that comes up in nearly every single one of these interviews on Mindfuel is that we, especially as endurance athletes, can get very focused on the outcome, but really, what are we there for? We're there to train and enjoy the process. So I love that a lot of the milestones that you set for yourself are about the process. It's about your recovery. It's about strength, which is ultimately like life giving and proving to be positive for our longevity. So it's not just about running. And yeah, just waking up and being excited about it. That's absolutely how it should feel. How often, so if that excitement starts to wane or injury pops up or life happens, how do you revisit goals that you have set and maybe reset if you need to?
Earlier this year, really starting last year in the fall, I had some sort of like post tib issue. And it first started out, I think, as kind of like mild shin splints in both legs, and then had some PT, kind of worked through it, ended up just being isolated to my left leg. Had a few scares where I thought there was a stress fracture, some sort of stress reaction. I had a couple MRIs earlier this year just to validate that it wasn't. But that was right in the middle of my block for Boston. You know, Boston's such a milestone race. I probably pushed myself a little more than I would have if I didn't have a race on the calendar, but I was very set on I'm going to run the race as long as I feel decent enough and don't risk injuring myself. I'm going to go run the race. And so that was a big wrench in my plan for running Boston. During that block, probably took a total of 4 weeks off over the course, like never consecutively, but I took a week here, I took a few days there, took another week like in the middle of the block at some point, and that was really deflating. But I think mentally, I just was excited that I had qualified first, and so just making it to
As
the
you should be, we can pause and celebrate that. It's an very impressive achievement. So,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Yeah. But I had to pause and just remind myself, like, this is an accomplishment and this is kind of just an opportunity to celebrate and go have a fun day. And so every week that ticked by that I wasn't running, I was still cross training. I was still doing my strength training. And so again, those process goals come back into play because it would have been very easy for me to be like, I'm going to take this week off and just not do anything. And that's counter to what I needed to do to stay fit. And so I got on the bike and kept getting in the gym and kept staying fit so that when I came back to running a week later, I wasn't losing anything. And one other side note, I've been using this weight supported contraption that goes on top of a treadmill. It's called the lever, and it's been a huge benefit because I've just been able to keep training through some of those little niggles and like discomfort. But anyway, that was a moment where I really had to rethink my goal and what I was trying to do. And I went into that race thinking it's not a PR course, but I could still probably run a fast marathon. But with the way the block went, my mindset really shifted and was like, I'm going to go have a great day, enjoy being in Boston, love being on the course. I got to run with a friend of mine for pretty much the entire race. And
Wow.
it was great to have that support there. And when I started the race, I said, I'd like to go under 3 hours. I think that's still very feasible. And, I had to fight a little bit at the end once we got through Newton. But once we got through Heartbreak and crested it, it was like, all right, well, there's 10K left and I've got it. So I'm just going to, put it all out there and try to go and, stay under 2 hours. And I thankfully was able to. But if I hadn't, it would have been fine. Like, I think that's the takeaway for me through that really tough, probably one of the toughest blocks that I've had is like, things are going to happen. It's never going to be perfect. And being flexible within reason, because you can always say like, oh, I'm not going to do my workout today because I'm tired. I think those are not the right things to, compromise on. But something like this for a race like that, make some adjustments so that you can still
Yeah,
go and
you've got to play the long game a bit, right?
yeah,
Like you needed to get to the start line with as little pain as possible in
exactly.
as best shape as you could given what your body was telling you. And it sounds like you did a remarkable job of that and phasing in the rest when you needed it, but maintaining the fitness all the while.
Yeah, yeah. It turned out to be just a great experience for me to go through a block like that. I've really not dealt with any injury since I've been doing all of this stuff for the last handful of years, and so I consider
Amazing.
myself very lucky. And to have to deal with it, if I could go back and do it again, I might be a little smarter with how I spend the down times and like the amount of time that I took off and all of that. But I was seeing a PT, I got an MRI, like I was doing all of the things to,
Yeah.
check the boxes that I'm okay. So thankfully all of that's really subsided and don't really have any residual
Amazing.
issues. So yeah.
Well, and let's hope the non-injury streak continues.
Yeah, right.
So that's really interesting about how you've kept the goals in mind, kind of macro. What about if you need to reset in the moment. So, in the middle of a race, maybe something's not quite going to plan, or vice versa, it's going amazingly. Do you set yourself a new lower time goal, for example, or in the middle of a workout, you aren't hitting the splits? How do you adjust? And I guess specifically if things aren't going to plan, how do you make that mental switch of not beating yourself up, but kind of resetting and still feeling like you accomplished something walking away from that race or that training, even if it wasn't the initial goal set out?
Yeah. I'm actually going to start with it's going better than I thought. So let's see what's left because grandma's was exactly that. Grandma's the goal was to run just sub 3. And I got to the last 5K and I felt like I had so much left. So I ran, I was averaging 6:45 or so up to that point. And the last 5K or the last 4 miles, I ran 6:40, 6:30, 6:10, 6 flat, which that's not typical of a marathon. And so I got to that point. I was like, man, I still feel really good. So I just see what I have left. And that's what happened.
Incredible.
I think those are those are outliers. That's not always how it goes in a race. Most of the time, actually, it's not how it goes. And so, changing course and changing the plan during the race, I've had to do that as recently as last weekend. And then workouts that's happened plenty of times. I think workouts for me, it's just about knowing that you're in the middle of a week and in the middle of a block and you may have high mileage and you might just have fatigue. And I'm going to still put the effort out, but if the numbers don't match for one workout, I'm okay. And I may mull it over for a day, but then come Thursday, it's in the past and like the time is logged. I finished or I didn't finish, and that's
Mhm.
okay because I get another chance on Sunday or I get another chance on
Totally.
Wednesday. So workouts for me, those are easier to kind of manage in the moment just because of the amount of time that you have and the number of workouts that you're going to have. Race situations are for me are I had to deal with this in the race. I started out my watch was splitting uh way off and I kind of didn't realize it until like 5K in. And so I had started out slower than I wanted. I was like running
And this
6.
is in a full marathon.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a long way to go.
Yeah. So I was at about 5K and realized that my splits were off from the mats. And I don't know what happened with my watch. I have no idea. But anyway, so I just started looking at time splits and I had started off too slow. I was like behind pace where I needed to really start out. I started out at like 6:30 basically. And I made up the time. There's plenty of time to make it up. And I wasn't worried about that. But about halfway, I split the half at 123. And so I was just off 245 at that point. And I like to try to negative split when I can if the course allows for it. And so I was like, okay, I can make up a couple minutes probably. But around 22, I don't think I bonked fully, but it was that initial feeling of like, man, something is wrong. And it wasn't muscle. It was energy. It was nutrition. I'm not sure. I think a gel maybe just hadn't caught up with me yet. And I had a moment of like, I'm going to pass out. And once I got through it, because
Oh.
a mile or so later, I was like, okay, I'm okay. I was looking at the clock and I was like, I don't know if it's going to happen today. So I just said like, I'm going to PR today, no matter what, because I'm already on pace for that. And if that's what happens, that's okay. But as the miles started clicking off, I realized like I was going to be really close. So I think that's when your positive self-talk really kicks in. And so the moment before that, I had made a concession that it would be okay. I would still PR. It wouldn't be the time goal I wanted, but that's all right because this is not the only race that I'm going to do. This is
Sure, it
not
doesn't
like
define you.
correct. And so after working through that and, telling myself like, listen, you're close right now. You could probably still do it. And so the last kind of 5K, I just kept clicking off the miles in that moment, it goes back to process kinds of things. It's like
Mhm.
cadence. It's am I relaxed? Trying not to worry too much about pace, but also looking at the clock and making sure like, am I going to be able to make it? And so the last mile, the last 800 or so, I really had to kick. And then when I crossed the finish line, I thought I had gone over 245. When I called my coach, he was like, great job. And I was like, yeah, I thought I was going to get under 245, but it was really close. I hadn't actually looked at the results yet. And he told me, he was like, you ran 3 seconds under 245. And so But I think that just it's a long story to show an example of you have to shift your goals sometimes during the race. And I think having a backup goal or having like a B goal is okay.
I'd say it's more than okay. I would say it's essential.
Yeah, as a result of, how the race unfolds, marathon is a tough distance and you're really kind of towing the
Yeah.
line for the whole race. And so being able to do that, but then also being able to come back from it, I think is important too. Like, can you talk yourself out of a hole that you're in? And sometimes physically you might not be able to, but a lot of times mentally you can. And positive self talk and just my own motivation and all of those kinds of things were really helpful just in the last kind of 10K to get my mind right and stay the course and just trust my training as well.
The training, yes. And congratulations, huge achievement.
Thank you.
And I think it's further evidence of, what the research even shows that actually our brains really are what ultimately control our fatigue.
Mm.
And when we can start to get hold of those thoughts and reassure ourselves that we're fine, know what edge we're willing to continue to push on, where we want to get to, the body responds. Certainly sounds like it did in your case. So very cool. Josh, if you could wrap this up for us with one succinct or final thought on goal setting, what would you leave us with?
Not all goals are outcome based, and one race doesn't define you or your training block or your fitness. And so thinking of other ways to set goals for yourself besides I want to run X time at X race, I think is a way to stay motivated and to stay consistent and has been the way that I've really progressed my training over the last few years. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I could recommend to age group athletes, especially because we're not getting paid to run these races. There's no prize most of the time. And so it's about the process that you use to approach your training. And there are far more goals to set than just time-based goals.
Very wise words. Thank you.
Yeah.
Josh, if people want to connect with you, kind of riff on all of this, get your advice on things, how can they find you?
So I don't have social media. So just my email is probably the easiest way if you want to reach out. I am dabbling in coaching. So if anyone is interested in any kind of coaching advice or just want to talk through the training and how to set it up and how to set goals, very open to those kinds of conversations. My email is josh.ross.scott@gmail. So I'm sure you can post that somewhere so people could just click on it.
Absolutely. That will be on our website in the experts section. We can pop it in the notes below the video here on YouTube as well. Josh, thank you. This has been really enlightening and very inspirational. You are an incredible athlete. So, congratulations on all of your success. And if this has resonated with all of you, as usual, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. Any follow-up comments or questions specifically on this, you can post in the comments down below or email us directly at connect@mindfuel.fit. If you haven't already, hopefully this encourages you to check out the other videos on the channel. And we've got loads more resources on goal setting and all of our topics at Mindfuel on our website, which is mindfuel.fit. You can also subscribe to our mailing list there. So, Josh, thank you again very much for the time today. Thanks to all of you for tuning in and happy and healthy training. See you soon.
Thanks, Laura.